Evening, everybody. Welcome to another praise session. We're here to praise Yahusha. Where am I looking? There. It's wonderful to be here with you tonight. We're talking about Yahusha and how he is so much more better than everything that came before him. He's a fulfillment of everything. It's going to come through the songs. It's going to come through the word tonight. Let's praise him, yeah? Let's do that new song. I've just been working on a new song and we'll go through it again, yeah? Better than Eden's perfect garden, better than Noah's ark, better than Moses' tabernacle, better than patriarchs, better than Joshua in battle, better than Samson's head. Yahusha is better in every way. Better than Samuel's oil anointing, better than David's harp, better than Solomon's great temple, better than Esther's heart, better than Elijah's chariot, better than Daniel's dreams. Yahusha is better in everything. He's Melchizedek, he's our king and priest, he's eternal life, prophecy complete. Every knee will bow, every tongue confess that Yahusha reigns better. That Yahusha reigns better. Better than sacrificial system, better than blood from Hades, better than laws on stony tablets, better than Aaron's priests, better than vessels made with hands, better than Israel's feast. Yahusha is better and he fulfills. Yes, he is. He's Melchizedek, he's our king and priest, he's eternal life, prophecy complete. Every knee will bow, every tongue confess that Yahusha reigns better. That Yahusha reigns better. Crowned with many crowns, he's the King of kings, supernatural, healing in his wings, first fruit creation, living through us now. Oh, Yahusha reigns better. Oh, Yahusha reigns better. Better than Eden's perfect garden, better than Noah's ark. Yes, he is. Better than Moses' tabernacle, better than patriarchs, better than Joshua in battle, better than Samson's head. Yahusha is better in every way. Better than Samuel's oil anointing, better than David's harp, better than Solomon's great temple, better than Esther's heart, better than Elijah. Elijah's chariot, better than Daniel's dream. Yahusha is better in everything. Here we go. He's Melchizedek. He's our King and Priest. He's eternal life. Prophecy complete. Every knee will bow. Every tongue confess that Yahusha reigns better. That Yahusha reigns better. He's crowned with many crowns, crowned with many crowns. He's the King of Kings, supernatural, healing in his wings, first fruit creation, living through us now. Oh, Yahusha reigns better. Oh, Yahusha reigns better, better than everything. Oh, Yahusha reigns better. We praise you, oh, Yahusha reigns better. Praise you, Yahusha, oh, Yahusha reigns better. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Yes, you are crowned with many crowns, Yahushua, and we praise you tonight. We worship you, we lift up your mighty name, Yahushua, as the name above all names. We gather together in your mighty name. Ask you to be with us tonight, Yahushua. To work through your supernatural power. To touch us, heal us, teach us, guide us, Yahushua. All our lives of service to you. So be it. All right. Very exciting tonight. We're starting a new book written by our beloved brother Paul. It's the book of Hebrews, and I think it's going to shed a lot of light on a lot of confusion that's going on in the bride right now. It's a hot topic on social media, this old covenant, new covenant thing. We've been called Christians, we've been called trolls, we've been called carpetbaggers, we've been called every name you can be called under the sun, but there's a fundamental difference and something really important that everybody needs to understand. Jew bashers, oh, whatever. Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's all about Yahusha's word. We come to his word, yeah? So this is really exciting tonight, particularly after a year or two ago going through Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. This is really exciting to me because Paul, who as we know was a scholar, he was a Pharisee, he was killing Yahusha's people, before he was met by Yahusha on the road. Many people don't like Paul. They say he's a heretic. I don't agree with that. He met Yahusha. He was one of his disciples. If you don't even believe in that foundation, don't have much to talk about. Tonight's about Yahusha is better. This is just an introduction to the book of Hebrews. A lot of summarising and pulling out some major points, and then there's a brilliant word and an article towards the end. Let's just lay the groundwork tonight to show you all where we're heading with this and what we can do about it in our own personal lives, yeah? Yahusha is better, just like the song. Yahusha is better. And there's a clue there in your picture about who Yahusha is. See the breastplate he's wearing? Yahusha's eternal Melchizedek priesthood. The book of Hebrews. So tonight we're basing this theme of being better, because there's not much argument. Everyone knows Yahusha did a whole lot of things. He's better. Paul said it like this: but now Yahusha has achieved a better, more excellent service than what was given to the priests. The same way that he's the mediator of a better blood covenant. established on much better promises. Get the impression here that it's a different covenant? Now, he's not changing who he is, but he's lifting up a different covenant because it's different blood. This new blood covenant letter called Hebrews, everyone mainly knows it as the book of Hebrews. Some have called it Yahusha's eternal priesthood. That's a good name, but a bit of a mouthful. So we'll keep calling it Hebrews for simplicity. So this new blood covenant book was written by Paul with Timothy's help in Italy around 63 to 68 AD, just prior to the Jewish war and the destruction of the city of Jerusalem and the temple under the Emperor Titus and the Roman armies. Just to give you some context there, this is when it was written. It's one of the last books that Paul wrote, one of them. The Judaism founded in Babylonian captivity, remember we went through that with Daniel and Ezra? They couldn't have the temple and they couldn't have the ark and they couldn't have Yahuwah's presence or their blood sacrificing, so they thought, stuff it, we're going to go ahead without you, and the whole synagogue system, Babylonian, which became Judaism. So that was founded in Babylon and it was still being carried on. Even after Yahusha died, still being carried on. And so we'll see many references to the temple service and the encouragement to the Jewish believers that they had no continuing city. They had no continuing city, so they should seek the one that's coming. Do you understand that? They weren't to look to Jerusalem in the natural, because it was soon to be destroyed anyway. So especially after it was destroyed, what are we going to do? We've got no temple, we've got no priesthood, we've got no city. Titus came and destroyed the whole city. What are we going to do? No continuing city, so where should they look? They should seek the one that's coming. It seems that this second generation of new bridal believers, after the events of the book of Acts, they were experiencing massive trials. So Paul and Timothy, who were living in Italy at the time, no doubt sent this letter to the Hebrew believers in Palestine to encourage them to hold fast, in spite of the trials and persecutions they were suffering at the hands of their fellow countrymen. At the hands of their fellow countrymen. Who is it they're being persecuted for mainly? They're being persecuted because of Yahusha, but it wasn't the average pagan person in the street that persecuted them, was it? Because they didn't care what you worship. Just like out there, you can worship whatever you want. Children are raised today to be sensitive and coexist and not prejudiced to anybody's religion. You can believe whatever you want out there. So it was the Pharisees and the Sadducees that they were mainly dealing with. Who would our Pharisees and Sadducees be today? Those of like mind or pretending to be of like mind? So Paul was writing this letter to encourage them. However, Yahusha intended this letter to go global and be an encouragement for the bride of all ages in every kindred, tongue, tribe and nation. We can understand that. We're getting encouragement from it still today. So the true purpose for this letter was to help believers overcome the temptation to relapse again back into the comfort of Judaism with all of its tradition and ceremonies. Very important that. Because they had nothing tangible, visible to hang on to. No temple, no priesthood, nothing visible to hang on to. People in Christianity and Judaism and religion in general want something. A preacher, teacher, pastor, rabbi, man, woman, altar, something to grab onto and say, this is what I'm standing on this because I can see it. But to send them out into something supernatural like Yahusha, a real relationship where you can hear his voice, they freak out. And they might, if given enough pressure, just run back to religion, run back to a man-made form of, So that's what Paul was trying to encourage them not to do. Don't relapse again back into the comfort of Judaism with all of its tradition and ceremonies. Like today, don't relapse back into the Jewish shadows that are easy. It's easy to do the letter, isn't it? Without understanding what it was for. Anyway, Paul's letter to the Galatians, which we'll probably do after this, it reveals the terrible influence of the Judaistic teachers. So the chief purpose of this letter of Hebrews is to show that Yahusha, through divine heart operation and set-apart spirit indwelling, he transcends and transforms in esteem and favour in every way. He transcends and transforms the whole past covenant of Moses' economy, of literal laws and sacrifice. This opposition to Yahusha and his claims of divinity caused many Hebrew believers to be persecuted and excommunicated from the synagogue unless they recanted. Now we know that Yahusha came along and said, I did not come to abolish any of the laws, any of the prophets, not one jot or one tittle of the law or the Torah, as he said, will be abolished, will be passed away until heaven and earth and all that. He said that. He didn't come to... How could he? Because he is the living word made flesh. He is the Torah. He is Moses, the commandments given to Moses. He is all those instructions in a human body. Yeah? The first fruit of many to come, of which we are. So how could we go against the laws given to Moses? How could we go against his Torah, his instructions? We can't. We'd be going against him. This is where it gets interesting. This is a better Leviticus. Not a replacement for Leviticus, a better Leviticus. And if you recall, and this is some homework for you all, if you want to start going through Leviticus for the next few months as we do Hebrews, very interesting because it is a literal fulfillment of everything in Leviticus. So if you don't understand Leviticus or remember it, and I did a whole video series on it, you can watch if you want, this is a better Leviticus. In order to fully appreciate and understand the secret gems within this letter, we must understand Leviticus and all of Moses' writings actually, because everything that Leviticus meant for the priesthood of old, in other words, it was their marching orders. Leviticus was their marching orders and the very specific instructions for behaviour, the sacrificial system, the tabernacle protocol, even the Day of Atonement. That's what Leviticus was to this priesthood. It was their training manual. So everything this book of Leviticus was for the priesthood of old, the book of Hebrews is for us, Yahusha's new covenant priesthood today. It's our specific training manual, yeah? And what the priest should do. More than any other letter, Hebrews is the companion, not the replacement, the companion of the book of Moses, all the books of Moses, not a replacement. For without Hebrews, much of the old covenant writings would remain a mystery and unsolved. Hebrews is indeed the Leviticus for the new bridal fellowship, for both are incomplete without the other. Just as Daniel is incomplete without revelation. Remember how Daniel was told, put your pen down? And he was very unsatisfied and was freaked out and stressed out. He wanted to know what the end of the story was. Couldn't find out. 600, 700 years or so later, John finished the story, didn't he? Picked up where Daniel left off. Paul shines, this is the same scenario here. Paul shines divine light on Moses and finished the fulfillment story, just as John does for Daniel. So, understand that? You can't have one without the other, because everything that the shadows taught us in Leviticus, all the old covenant priests, they had to learn. We can't just read that and go, oh, that's what we've got to do, without considering what Yahusha did. And we can't just abolish that, replace that, ignore that, and just look at what Yahusha did, because otherwise we don't appreciate what he did. You know what I'm saying? Yeah? This is what Christianity does. They ignore everything that came of old, and they just want to replace it. And it gives the opportunity for anybody now, any crackpot, to come along and go, I'm the bride, yeah. But you don't do that. You don't believe that. You don't see that. And it also gives the opportunity for everybody who's still religious and Hebrew roots and shadowy and all that sort of stuff to do just that and not face that Yahusha transformed everything, put everything into a behaviour, yeah? It's not about all the outward ceremony, it's about a behaviour. So you've got to have both. You've got to have the whole 66 books plus a few others if you want. This is a better priesthood. There is no other book that really deals with Yahusha's new covenant priesthood the same way this letter does, providing so much fulfillment to most of the old covenant writings and instructions, and applying these truths. The majority of believers without harnessing and applying these truths, if we don't do that, the majority of believers remain in the laborious old shadow teachings, never truly appreciating what Yahusha accomplished on the torture stake with his divine blood. Yeah? They're laborious old shadow teachings to us today in hindsight, because you've got to look at historical fulfillment and prophetic fulfillment going on. Yahusha's always moving forward, not replacing, but transforming as he goes along, breathing into it life more and more and more. Yeah? It's all about his blood. Yes, Yahusha's death and resurrection is the key to placing all scripture that came before in the right order and perspective. It's all about what he did on the torture stake. Yeah? We have to look at everything old that came before and put it through the process, through the achievement, through what Yahusha achieved on the torture stake for us. A better high priest. This letter of Hebrews is also the only place where we'll find answers to the questions concerning Melchizedek. It's the only place actually that actually says, word for word, who Melchizedek is. The king priest who appeared to Abraham. Who was he? Was he a Hebrew or a Gentile king? Was he an angelic being? Or was he one of the patriarchs like Shem? Or was he an actual appearance of Yahusha long before his official entrance into this world for our deliverance? I mean, he can pop up anywhere he wants in history. He can do anything. Yeah? He wrestled with Jacob, sconed him in the hip. Jacob was walking with a hip for the rest of his life, with a limp for the rest of his life. He appeared many times in the older scriptures. He can do that. Better feasts. The Gospels deal with the fulfillment to the feast of Passover. You understand that? Yahusha's life and death taught us, showed us how Passover was fulfilled, yeah? Blood of the lamb put on the doorposts, kill the lamb on the 10th day, all that. Yahusha fulfilled all that in his life and his death and resurrection. And then the Acts, which we've read, and the disciples' writings, they all deal with the fulfillment of the Feast of Pentecost, everything that happened when his spirit fell, turning all the believers into living temples, yeah? That divine fire. So then we saw that fulfilled. But where is the great Day of Atonement and its ceremonies explained? And other feasts too, but mainly the great Day of Atonement. Where's that fulfilled? We know Yahusha fulfilled it, but where's it written? The answer is found in Hebrews, covering the subject of the tabernacle of Moses, the entrance of Aaron, the high priest, within the veil once a year. It's all written here. It's very exciting where we're heading the next few months, guys. What do these things mean to Yahusha and his bridal fellowship today? Well, stay tuned. Hebrews provides answers to all these many questions. Also, it's a better temple. Yahusha is a better temple. The angle of his arms there aren't quite right, sorry. They should be above his head, but I still like the picture, all right? Because it's a temple and it's inside him. He was the living temple, the only living temple at that time. After 400 or 500 years of silence, no presence, no one even heard from the voice of the Father, Yahuah, no one heard anything. Yahusha came along, and he was, especially after his immersion and the Spirit coming into him, he was a living, walking temple, a temple man, yeah? And all those behaviours, that's why he kept going, psst, come, I'll show you how to really do it. You've heard it written that this should be done, and that's cool, but why don't you try doing it this way? Yeah, he turned it into a living behaviour. He was the better temple. The new Hebrew believers in accepting Yahusha, they had no material temple, just like we don't. They had no priesthood. No sacrifices, no rites or ceremonies to ground them or comfort them, as I mentioned before. External things that we can stand on and go, oh yes, we feel righteous, we're right. We've done our daily good things today. They didn't have any of that, just like we don't. They had to leave the temporal and material, the earthly shadows, the lessons, the illustrations that came of old, the natural, the fleshly, the carnal. They had to leave all that behind and turn that which was eternal, and turn to that which was eternal. Turn to the spiritual, the supernatural, the heavenly, and the invisible. Didn't Paul say that? We all walked under the same cloud. We all saw the same pillar of fire. We all ate the same spiritual drink and spiritual meat in the wilderness. All your fathers did that, and they were destroyed. Guess who all that was pointing to? Yahusha. They had to face that the true temple was in Yahusha and his body, and that the true sacrifice and priesthood was in the way Yahusha's body behaved on this planet. Understand that? The true temple was in Yahusha and his body. All the instructions that came before were shadows, teachings that are not to be ignored, but they're to be read and say, okay, they did that in a building, they did that with an animal, they did that with a palm branch, they did that with this, they did that with a tzitzit, they did that. How do I do that in my body? Yeah? How do I behave that day to day? Yeah? Nothing's abolished. It's got to be behaved in a living way, because that's what Yahusha did. He had the better order. The better order. I'm not going into a lot of these pictures either. They're just a bit of recalling to the book of Leviticus when we went through it all. Some of the same pictures, just to recall in your minds. Yahusha was the better order. So here in Hebrews, Paul seeks to wean the believers, just like you'd wean a baby from milk. He seeks to wean the believers from all the external comforts of the oral laws and bring them to true belief and obedience in Yahusha and the things of the Spirit. Because we know there was nothing wrong with the divine laws, the Ten Commandments, the Torah, if you want to call it that. Nothing wrong with that at all. But over time, in Babylonian captivity and everything else, those true things, those tablets that were held inside the ark, they were kind of pushed to the side. 614 plus hundreds of other laws were brought in and passed down from generation to generation. They were called the oral laws or the halakha, or they had all these different names, and it became tradition. It became religion, a Jewish religion. That's what Yahusha was against. That's what Paul and all the disciples were against. Not the Torah that was in the commandments. No, not at all. In the ark. No, not at all. You've got to know these things. Oh, how the heart of mankind leans on externals, leans on the visible and the temporal, the shadow. We lean on the shadow instead of the fulfillment, that which is invisible and eternal. How do I believe in something that's invisible? That's called faith or belief. Trust. That's the definition of belief, actually. Belief is believing, faith, trust is believing in something that's not seen. So to be weaned away from what had become, wasn't originally, but what had become a dead Mosaic order. That's what was behaved. Just like today, it's dead. What the Jews are doing today, what the Christians are doing today, and then the Messianics and Nazarene are copying all of it into a big swill. What's happening today is a dead movement. They had to be weaned away from what had become a dead Mosaic order, with all its outward, visible, natural forms of worship, and come over to that which was entirely supernatural. Well, that takes some cojones, doesn't it, to follow something that's invisible. Yeah? It takes some belief, some strength of character. This was life or death to these new Hebrew believers because they were Hebrew. They were Jewish. They, if they did this and Yahushua just turned out to be another false prophet, they'd be taken out and stoned, because they were denying, You couldn't just declare that. They were taught for thousands of years that you can't put a face, you can't put an image on the creator of heaven and earth. Yahuwah taught them that. Don't worship me like the pagans do. You will not put an image to me of stone or wood or gold or silver, nothing. They weren't allowed to. Didn't stop them from worshipping idols though. We'll worship idols, but when a man comes along actually healing people, oh no, that's a bit far, mate. No, you're jumping the shark now, buddy. No, that's too much. No. We'll believe in gold and silver and bow down to idols, but no. You're going too far now, Yahusha. We can't believe that you're the Messiah. No way. See how ridiculous it is? So the purpose of this letter is to carry them from a shadow teaching. The purpose was to wean them from Moses over to Yahusha, who Moses and the prophets were pointing everyone to anyway. They weren't contradicting each other. Yahusha said that. And here's another interesting point. If you're weaning a baby from breast milk or whatever, weaning from milk to solid food doesn't mean you don't drink liquids anymore, does it? Weaning someone from milk to solid food doesn't mean you don't drink liquids anymore, does it? It means you mature. And most of what you need, dietary ways, is in solid food. Yeah? You don't need to have a liquid diet. So, you see the shadow and see the fulfillment here? We go on supernatural with Yahusha, because everything that Yahusha is encompasses everything that came of old as well. It doesn't replace it, doesn't abolish it. It includes it into a living behaviour. The old blood covenant was but the seed, the root, and the foundation. The new blood covenant is the fruit. Can you have fruit without a seed? Can you have the tree without the seed, the foundation, the root? Who is the root? Yeah. The structure of Yahusha himself. The new blood covenant is the fruit, the tree, the structure of Yahusha himself. And all is fulfilled in him. Everything that every shadow that's cast by his image comes to his feet. Yeah? You understand how a shadow works? You meet Yahusha. In every shadow you meet to him. That's the whole purpose of the shadow, to find him, not just to do the shadow. So the purpose of this letter is to emphasize this truth. When Yahuwah spoke on the mountain of transfiguration in the presence of Moses, the Torah law, and Elijah, the prophets, he said to Peter, James and John, the foundation of his new bridal fellowship, he said, "This is my beloved son. Hear him. Listen to him." Yeah? Remember when Yahushua went up on the mountain and just peeled open his flesh a little bit, was transformed into his eternal being? Yeah? The voice could be heard from the Father saying, "This is my beloved Son. Hear him." It reminds us of what the Jews call the Shema, the Shema. Hear, O Israel, Yahuwah is your Elohim, Yahuwah is one. Not 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. Yahuwah is one. And you will love Yahuwah your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, with all your might. You will love your neighbour as yourself. Sounds like he's quoting Yahusha, doesn't it? He's not. Yahusha was quoting him, because this was when Moses and Joshua were delivering this word. See how it's the same words? Yahusha didn't replace anything. Breathed life into the same living words. So let's go to a couple of verses in Hebrews just to push this point forward. In Hebrews 4 it says, "Seeing then that we have a great high priest who passed into the heavens." Of course, that's Yahusha, the son of Elohim. Seeing that we have a great high priest, let us hold fast to our confession. Let us hold fast to our belief in him. Don't let anything shake our belief in him. Why? Because Yahusha takes away the first to establish the second, establish the better. Yeah? One thing was good. Everything Yahusha does is good. His commands, good. Torah, good. Laws, good. But Yahusha takes away the first to establish the second, establish something better. As Paul stated in 1 Corinthians 15, it is first the natural, then afterwards the spiritual. Do you understand that concept? It is first the natural, something that happened historically in the flesh, in mankind, then it points obviously to something that's going to happen spiritually. Let's look at this example in motion from the beginning to the end. He, Yahusha, takes away the old covenant to establish the new covenant. We know he did that. It's better. Better. He takes away the first Adam to establish the last Adam. Just as sin, just as the curse, just as eternal death came into this world through a man, Adam, so it had to be taken out of the world, conquered, destroyed, sin and death, by a man also. And that man was Yahusha. He, Yahusha, he takes away the first heavens and the first earth to establish the new heavens and earth. Scripture says that too. Better. See? He takes away the natural birth to establish the spiritual birth, the new heart and the new spirit birth, yeah? Remember when he said that to Nicodemus? In John 3, I think it was? Nicodemus said, how can a man be born again? How can he be reborn? Does he have to climb back up into his mother's womb and be born again? How's that going to work, Yahusha? Yahusha said, unless you are born of water, what's the water? Him, his living word. He is the water. Through immersion, water and the Spirit, unless you're born of water and the Spirit, you can't even see the kingdom of heaven. You can't even see the reign of the Shalom. So he takes away the natural birth, being born in the natural, which everybody out there is, and gives us spiritual birth. He takes away the Passover to establish Pentecost and then tabernacles. Now let's look at that, because that could be definitely taken the wrong way. He takes away the Passover to establish Pentecost and then tabernacles. So does that mean we don't do Passover anymore? Of course we do Passover. That's what Yahusha achieved on the torture stake. It means we're no longer focusing on his death all the time, the daily shedding of blood and the curse of the law, because it's all about life and joy. Yeah, we're moving on to other feasts, yeah, and what they stood for, yeah. Whereas back then, all they had was Yahusha's death, yeah, and prior to that, all they had was death. And if you did intentional crimes, you were dragged outside and stoned, and you'd lose your life completely. Yahusha took all those sins, all those consequences, all the curse of the law, and that's what he nailed to the torture stake. He didn't nail the Torah, the instructions, the laws, the definition of right and wrong in this world. He never nailed that to his torture stake with him, did he? Because that's who he is. He doesn't change. He said that. I don't change. You can rest in that. That's why you're not consumed. But he did take on our list of crimes and the punishment onto Pentecost, which was the ushering in of the new temple, the living temples, and then, of course, tabernacles, which all speaks about his second return. He takes away the tabernacle of Moses and David's praise tent, combining them to establish the temple of Solomon. One was all about sacrificing animals, and the other one was all about sacrifices of praise. And he, because he can do anything, took them both together and formed a new temple, which was all about sacrifice and praise. Isn't that what this temple's all about? Sacrificing. We've dealt a lot about sacrificing the flesh, dying to the self, and praise. That's what we come together for, to praise. And you can do it all day, every day if you want. Hum to yourself and praise Yahusha. Don't have to have musical instruments. Make a joyful noise. That's all some people can make, a noise, and that's fine. He takes away the natural Israel. Here's a doozy. He takes away the natural Israel after the flesh to establish the spiritual Israel of Yahusha. Many people don't like the term spiritual Israel because, as I said before, it gives opportunity for any Tom, Dick and Harry to come along and say, oh yeah, I like being Israel. Yeah, I'll be the new Israel. Yeah, I'm Israel. Christians do it all the time. That's all done away with now. It's called replacement theology. It means Israel's been done away with and the church is now the bride. That's what they believe. That's not true. But it's true, Yahusha did take away the natural Israel. He divorced them, Israel after the flesh, to establish something supernatural, establish a spiritual Israel of Yahusha. And there's a little star there, which means we've got to read something here. So it can't just be anybody declaring I'm the bride. John makes it very clear in Revelation that Yahusha's bride, those who the dragon is enraged with, those who the dragon is hunting. Yahusha's bride are those and only those who guard the Torah of Yahuah, which are his divine instructions, which have been going since Adam but were formally written by Moses. You've got to guard those and hold to the witness of Yahusha Messiah, which means to know and follow him. The bride cannot be one without the other. You can't just have the old without the new, and you can't just have the new without the old. You've got to understand that Yahusha is everything culminated in his body, and now we are as well. Do you understand that? It's all about behaviour. The sacrificing, the praise, the 10 Commandments, all the things that are instructed in Leviticus are now done in our bodies. Yeah? It's not about whether you wear a hat or a tzitzit or a beard or a tattoo or all the stuff that people argue about. It's about a new and living behaviour. Yeah? So we've got to go up, yeah. Lost my spot. He takes away the tablet of Moses. Yeah, I did that bit. He takes away the unbelieving generations to establish the belief generation, to enter Canaan land of peace and rest. That was the time of Joshua, remember that? Got rid of 40 years. For 40 years he got rid of the older generation. They didn't believe. And he only let the younger generation come in. He did something better. He takes away the Aaronic Levitical priests to establish the Melchizedek priesthood. Better. All this is going to make a lot more sense as we go through Hebrews. He takes away the animal sacrifices and offerings to establish the once for all sacrifice and offering of the body and blood of Yahusha. Better. We don't go back. We don't sacrifice animals. Yahusha was the last sacrifice. Yahusha takes away the tablets of stone to establish the tablets of our heart for his commands. Divine heart operation. He gives us a new heart. He writes his commandments on our hearts. We no longer have to graffiti our doorways, because the doorposts of your house, this is your house, this is the temple. He writes them on your hearts. Yeah. You can't forget them. You don't need to wear tzitzits to remember his commandments, because you feel it if you do something wrong, don't you? He jabs you in the heart and in the back of the neck, that shepherd's hook and the goad, and it's quite a fist fight some days. Yeah? Oh, no, I don't get that. He doesn't flog me because I wear tzitzits. Yeah, no way. He takes away the material temple to establish his supernatural temple, his bridal fellowship as his eternal dwelling place. We know about the temple. He takes away the corruptible, what we were born with, that wicked seed that controlled us most of our life. He takes away the corruptible, the temporal, to establish forever that which is incorruptible and eternal. That tiny little seed, like a mustard seed, the radiation coming off that is enough to transform and burn the bastard out of this body. Yeah, that's what it's doing every day. That's how powerful that tiny little seed is of his spirit. He's a better sacrifice. Yahusha truly is the whole substance of all Scripture. You can't pick and choose with Yahusha. He is all the Scripture that came before him, the substance of it. So if you don't include Yahusha in the Scripture, what is it you're actually reading? Has it got any substance in it? No. Because he's the living Word made flesh. His blood changes everything, including the covenant and his behaviour. Can't he do that? Doesn't he have the power to do anything? All the Psalms, all the prophets, all the Torah laws, everything that came before were pointing to Yahusha. If you read it with Yahusha's spirit in you, it does. It shows you. And he came along and no one recognised him. So he could have been quite discouraged, couldn't he? Thousands of years of laying all this down for you guys and you don't even see that it's me? But he said, I came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He found them. What did they do to him? Killed him. He had a handful that believed. And then he said, I'm going to the nations. Paul said the same thing. I've been to the Jews, now I'm going to the Gentiles. Yeah? The new bride is made up of Jews and Gentiles together. Nothing to do with lineage. All that lineage has been cut off. Everything of the old animal blood covenant passes through Yahusha's ultimate sacrifice. For if we don't, We insult him in the greatest of ways. As I said before, we have to pass everything that we've read before through what Yahusha did. So as you're reading the scripture every day, brothers and sisters, you read that, particularly if you're in the older books, older testament as they say, you've got to read it and go, that's what they had to do. Who's he talking to? Is that about me? Were these everlasting instructions, everlasting commandments, were they inside the ark? Are they for me? Or were they fashion? Were they culture? Were they food? Were they this? Were they... You've got to make that decision as you're reading the scripture, yeah? And when I say food, I'm talking about things that were designed to be food. I'm not talking about unclean things. Everything of the old covenant must pass through Yahusha's sacrifice. If we don't, it's like slapping him in the face with a wet sand shoe. And old shadow teachings, all old shadow teachings are either fulfilled, ended, or transformed into daily supernatural realities of behaviour. Is this making it clear when you see a lot of the arguments on social media? This makes it very clear. All shadow teachings, they're not wrong. They're beautiful. We study them. We learn all about them. They're wonderful. But they need to be understood as being either fulfilled, ended, or transformed into daily supernatural behaviour. Because of the death and resurrection of Yahushua Messiah. I mean, he hung on the torture stake, and what was the last thing he said? It's finished. What was he talking about? He took everything, the Jews, the Romans, the devil, everything they could do to him, he took on his body, and he was still breathing. They could not kill him. Ripped the flesh off his body, stuck thorns into his skull, whipped him, ripped out his beard, spat on him, hung there with nails through his hands and feet, rib cage turned inside out, could not kill him. He gave up his last breath. He said, "It's finished." What was he talking about? Everything that came before. All the animal sacrifices, all the temples, all the tabernacles, all the bloodshed, all the murders, all the not being able to connect with me, all that covenant, everything is finished. It's finished. Why? Because it was wicked? No, the people were. No, because I've finished it. I've fulfilled it. And a lot of people believe he actually yelled out shalom. We know what shalom means. Apart from meaning finished, it means peace. Great peace. Overwhelming sense of peace, joy, fulfillment. And he did that. He bridged the gap. Brought back a relationship that could not have been had since the Garden of Eden. He created open heavens again. Yeah? We can connect to the throne room again through a portal connection. They had open heavens in the garden. So he said, all that's come before, it's finished. It's in me. Yeah? And yet people still can't see this. Any of these bits that seem kind of confusing, we're going to go into these scriptures as we go on. It's like a summary tonight, yeah? Yahusha is better in every way. As we look at the overall theme of Hebrews, we are going to see a few key words being used over and over again, such as better. That's the first one we're dealing with. Yahusha is better. Let us, perfect, heavenly, in other words, supernatural, so much more. Consider, blood, priest or priesthood, partakers, belief, once for all, covenant, and eternal. They're just some of the main themes that are coming up. And all these words already, when we look at those words, all those words start to paint an abstract picture in our minds of what Yahusha's bride is to know and become on this earth. We're supposed to become a lot of these things. So following on that theme, let's look at what better actually means, because not only was Yahusha this, but we are to be in this because we're in a better covenant, built on better promises. What does better actually mean in the Hebrew language? A fish as being prolific, big and successful and, vibrant. Or timid in the sense of squirming, moving by the vibratory action of the tail. Experiencing that. To be or behave good or well. In the widest sense, to be or do better. Do better. To cheer, to please, to do well. So everything we read that came of old were types and shadows. Everything Moses went through in the wilderness, the Israelites, everything that they went through, we are to do better. Yeah? That's why we don't exclude any of those old writings. We include them, we read from them, and we learn from it and go, oh, that's an example of what not to be. Yeah? Do better. Do good. A good or good thing. A good man or woman. The good, the goods, the good things. Well. Beautiful. Best. Better. Bountiful. Cheerful. At ease. Fair. Fair with your words. Be in favour. To be fine, glad, good, graciously, joyful, kindly, kindness, like, the best, loving, merry, most pleasant, pleasing, pleasure, precious, prosperity, ready, sweet, wealth, welfare, well-favoured. To make redundant, that's interesting, which means no longer needed or useful. That's very interesting when you look at the covenants, isn't it? That's no longer needed. It was once upon a time. It's all they had. But Yahusha is all that plus who he is and where he's going. He's what came before, he's the present, and he's the future. So he's everything all combined. So that's made redundant. To make well, to sound beautiful or happy or successful, right? Be accepted, amend, better, be or make better. To be preeminent, preeminence, to gain, better, excellency or profitable. So it gives you an idea of what Yahusha was and what we are to be, doesn't it? Better. Do better. These are all the behaviours that Yahusha's supernatural better offers us for our lives. And they rest upon us like a crown. You know it if you're experiencing the better. Yeah? And sadly, most of the bride today are not experiencing the better because there's people standing in the doorway just pointing them back to the written word, back to the old stuff, which must be read, but must also be carried, understood, interpreted through Yahusha, his sacrifice, and then digested, listening to his spirit, abstract, listening to Yahusha. How do I behave this? Everything I'm reading, how do I behave it today? Because most people just read the scriptures for head knowledge. So they can appear knowledgeable, memorise the scriptures, quote it at people, try and catch them out, try and make them come under them. And if you say something fresh to them, where's the scripture for that? How do you prove that? What, don't you believe me? Why would I lie to you? You know? Yahusha had a better covenant behaviour. Much better. Today, we see a trend of men and women walking out of Christianity and Judaism, as we did, travelling through all those movements. They're walking out of those movements, are being herded. They're being herded into a Messianic, Nazarene, Hebrews for Yahusha, Hebrew roots movement, all those things that are going on in all its various sects and movements. Yet Matthew 23 explains exactly what's going on in these scandalous, renewed Hebrew shadow teachings, such as the older brother movement. What did Matthew 23 say? Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You stand in the doorway. You won't go in yourselves, nor will you let other people go in who are seeking the truth. We don't want to stand in the doorway. We want to open the door. So there's Yahusha. Go to him. Doing that confuses believers to be hoodwinked back into the old Hebrew shadow teachings that, as we've seen, All pointed to Yahusha anyway. Fulfilled. We don't wear the cultural garb that the Hebrews wore. Why would we walk around in robes, long beards, our heads covered, wearing tzitzits, blowing ram's horns? Why would we do that? That's what they did. That was a cultural thing, and he met them where he met them. They didn't have mobile phones to text each other for the next battle. Group text, there's a battle going on. They didn't have that. They had to blow a ram's horn. So can you see how it's stupid to just behave the shadow by itself? You've got to take all of that into today, because I was born today, not yesterday, in today's society. I wear today's clothing of society, yeah. We don't wear the cultural garb that the Hebrews wore. We don't celebrate the feasts and the Sabbath the way the Jews do today. Of course we celebrate the feasts, and of course we do the Sabbath. We don't do it the way the Jews do today, though. They don't even rest. They gather together. They have holy Shabbat meetings and bake bread and light candles. And what are you doing? You're having a big feast and a big party on every Friday night. You're supposed to be resting, you know? They don't do it. We don't celebrate any of these things the way the Jews do today. All those teachings have been fulfilled. So how do we celebrate? By resting. Good food, good wine, lots of loving. Paul said when you come together, do it in sincerity and truth. Yeah? Not following rituals, you know? Liturgy. That's a funky photo, isn't it? I like that one. Everything that Moses was, Yahusha, is in his body. See, there's two sets of hands there. Moses was holding the tablets. Yahusha became everything those tablets of stone are. He behaved every commandment. And they said to him, which is the greatest commandment? Trying to catch him out. And what did he say? Love. Love Yahuah your Elohim with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your strength. Love your neighbour as yourself. If you do that, you are behaving all the commandments. Oh, so I can go out and murder? No. I can go out and commit adultery? No. Because that's not loving, is it? I can steal? No. I can worship idols? No, that's not loving Yahuah. I can break the Sabbath? No, that's not loving Yahuah. See, it's all encompassed in that. You don't have to harp about the 10 Commandments. Raise your children in them, great. Even children in the belief, we learn them, but we don't have to keep harping on them because it's all about love, yeah? It's love. Where was I up to? Yahusha brought us into a new covenant where our body is now the temple. Our body is now the temple. Everything the old temple was pointed to Yahusha's new behaviour of blood covenant, where all priestly functions and duties are modified into our behaviour, bearing the fruits necessary for our crown of righteousness on the day of his return. Understand that? That's why they the commoners, they loved Yahusha. That's why people didn't know what to make of him. That's why the authorities, the religious teachers, preachers, pastors, rabbis, that's why they hated Yahusha so much. Because he knew the word inside and out, because he was the living word. And yet he said to them, this is how you behave it. You've heard it written that you cannot do this, but I say when you do it, do this. Behave it like this. You've heard it said that this is written, I say to behave it like this. And they were baffled. Because everything he said was just, wow, we've never heard the word like that. Just like it is today. People are doing all the shadows, and we're coming along saying, yeah, the shadows are great, but you don't have to do that behaviour anymore. Because that just makes you look like an idiot. And we're trying to reach the world. And you doing that makes the world think that Yahusha's an idiot. And that he's some religious crackpot. Because you're behaving like a 4,000-year-old Jew. That's not where it's at, yeah? So if we want to be this here, this living temple man or woman, we must pay attention to what's going on around us. Not be confused. Checking all ministries in their behaviour of righteousness. So we're not lost and deceived and lose our freedom of running the race for our crown of life. That's what it's all about. We dealt with the crown of life, didn't we? We can have it in this lifetime. Don't let anyone steer you off this path of truth. Now, I'm not going to go through all that, but that's the outline of where we're going in Hebrews. As already noted, Hebrews is a book of contrasts and comparisons, constantly moves from the good of the old to the better of the new covenant. And this is outline, presents the contrasts and comparisons of the epistle. And this is where we're going in the weeks to come, so we don't have to go through it. All the things that Yahusha was, all the things that he fulfilled, we sung about it tonight. We've gone through a whole article about it, so we don't have to go through all those things, but it's there. It's where we're heading in weeks to come. Of course, we can see Yahusha did not die on a pagan cross. He died on a torture stake in that position. Yeah? He was all the things that came before him. I want you to pay attention to this tabernacle because the priests had to be very careful. They had to gauge their relationship daily, minute by minute, by where they were standing in relation to this tabernacle. Because what was inside the tabernacle? Radioactive ark. And unless you were of a certain status, the closer you got, you might start feeling a bit warm. Like a nuclear fallout. Yeah? Like an Oppenheimer experience. Yeah? You might experience something like that. Yeah? You start frackling. Your little finger starts frackling. I've got to stand back. Yeah? I'm getting too close to this ark because there's a radioaction. That's why the priests were standing here. They weren't just standing there with walking sticks. They were standing there with swords. Anybody who came near the tabernacle that was a commoner would be either, yeah, come on, like security guards. You can't come in here because they'd be, frackled up. Everything that came before that was old, Yahusha fulfilled in his body. And then he brought his spirit onto the heads and hearts in the fire, remember, on Pentecost. So Yahusha, this is how I want you to visualize Yahusha. See that little fellow down there? Ministering to the ark, ministering to the lampstands, ministering the bread, ministering the incense. This little high priest down here. Yahusha now ministers in the temple of his bridal people. He's inside us, doing all those functions in us daily. Letting us know when we fall short, letting us know when we think the wrong thing, going, no, enough of that thought, enough of this, enough of that. You need more bread. You're getting a bit moody, a bit stroppy. You need some bread, the word. You need some light. That's his word, his presence. You need some incense. Go and talk to Yahusha. That's the prayers of the saints. Incense. Go and talk to Yahusha. Talk to me, he says, yeah? He's in our hearts ministering in this capacity. What was the conclusion of the night? Yahusha is better. Better than everything that came before him. Better than the prophets. He's the Torah made flesh. He's better than the angels. He created the angels and they worship him. He's better than the first Adam. He's the last Adam. He restores everything. He's better than human priests. He's the divine human priest. He's better than Moses. He is the mediator of a new covenant. He's better than Joshua and the promised land and all that. All the set-apart wars, because he is the true supernatural and eternal, incorruptible rest, incorruptible promised land of peace and rest in us. And we'll all one day become the New Jerusalem. He is better. Yahusha is better than Aaron. He's the king priest living in the power of an endless life. Scripture says that through his bride. Yahusha is better than Abraham because he's the seed of Abraham, yet he was also before Abraham. He said, before Abraham, I am. He was there before Abraham, the word Melchizedek who came in the flesh. Yahusha is better than the tabernacle. He ministers in the true and heavenly tabernacle and now within us too. He's not in earthly shadows anymore. He's not in earthly shadows anymore. So if you only do the earthly shadows, he's not in that. because he fulfilled them, and he wants you to read that, see that, know that, and bring it all to him. All that points you to an understanding of him and a relationship with him. Yahusha is better. He's the better covenant. He validates the new and everlasting blood covenant with better promises. What better promise could there be than a crown of life and a crown of righteousness? They couldn't have those things in the old covenant. They were unclean, and they had no means to become clean, because Yahusha's blood makes us truly clean. He validates the new everlasting blood covenant with better promises, for he is the new covenant personified, and all covenant promises are found in him. Yahusha is better than animal sacrifices. He is the divine human sacrifice once and for all. Yahusha is better than Moses and the laws on Mount Sinai. He is the king priest on Mount Zion, writing his laws and desires onto our reborn hearts so we can know him and please him in real time. Yahusha is better than the old covenant altar sacrifices and system. For in him and his body, the true sacrificing of self, the offering of the bulls of our lips, and the daily behaviour of picking up one's torture stake and following him into the sufferings and esteemed joy. Through all that it's shown. Understand how it's all to be behaved in our body now? The whole focus and task of the priest, as I said higher up, was to gauge his status, gauge his standing, his whereabouts, and ultimate relationship to the ark of Yahuwah's blood covenant. It literally dictated his location, his boundaries, where he couldn't go, where he couldn't walk. It dictated his behaviour and lifestyle all day. So he had to judge himself constantly. Oh, I'm not permitted in that section of the tabernacle, or I'll be frackled up. Like there's a big... And they knew what happened to Aaron's sons that were stuffing around in the set-apart place. They got frackled up. The fire shot out from the ark and frackled them up, disintegrated them. So those priests would have been on guard, wouldn't they? You know? They would have been freaked out. I'm not going any closer than what I've been sanctioned. Yeah? See how what that means for us today? With our temple, with our hearts. Constantly checking. Where is Yahusha? Are you with me in this? Am I supposed to be doing this? Am I supposed to be doing that? Understand? Yahusha is better. Yahusha is better. How much of your time, how much of your energy, how much of your mind, how much of your thought, communication, and your life during your day do you allow Yahusha to be dominant? How much? How much do you allow him to be the ruler, preeminent, and just plain better than you? You walk around knowing that Yahusha is better than you, or do you have your mind on most situations? This is what we're coming to. Yahusha is better. Do you let him have you completely? Because he's having his way with you and this earth, whether you like it or not. But flowing with him will stop the inner turmoil and the misery. You'll get through a lot quicker. Yeah? So, Yahusha is better, brothers and sisters. We are not pushing replacement theology. We are teaching that Yahusha divorced his old bride and he remarried. He took on a new bride with his own perfect blood. A new bride built on better promises. He didn't change his instructions. He didn't change who he is or his definition of right or wrong in his Torah, in his 10 Commandments, all that. But he now lives a better behaviour. Take everything that was old, put it through his ultimate sacrifice and say, how am I supposed to be behaving that today? Yeah? In a new and living way. That's the message tonight, guys. That's where we're heading. I'm very excited to go into Hebrews because this is going to blow the top off all of our understandings, yeah? So, there's only really 2 of you here. Would either of you like to pray? We're doing a mini altar call tonight. Would you like to pray about anything? Carol's got sciatica. She's gone out the front. So, would you guys like to pray about anything?
You should come forward today to ask that you help everyone, and thank you for your amazing work tonight and just speaking to us and helping Dave teach us.
Mm.
And it's just amazing how much you can get from one word.
Mm.
And we ask that you bless our family and you bless Chris and Victoria and you give them people that they can help.
Yeah.
And you just look over everyone down in Sydney and Peter Robert with their parents and with their dad. And we ask that you just keep doing what you're doing and keep sharing all this amazing information with us, because it's just amazing and we just want to learn more. So be it.
Hallelujah.
Thank you, Yisha, for this word that you've given us tonight, and I just ask that you spread it and share it with everyone in your bride, and ask that you help all of us and give us your strength and wisdom, keep fighting off demons and to understand this scripture and teachings that you're giving us. And we're just so thankful that we can come here and praise you every week.
Mm.
And I just ask that you keep protecting and blessing all of our family and friends.
Hallelujah.
And spread this message to everyone out there, because it's just amazing and true how you're better than all.
Mm.
So
Father, we close this meeting tonight. We thank you for your word. It keeps us sane, keeps us balanced, keeps us in your truth. We ask, there's a whole movement going on online in the socials. We ask that you have your hand on that situation. And there aren't a lot of people in our local communities that are interested at this point, but there are a lot of people online who are interested, and we pray that you bring them into your new understanding, your covenant, the truth of it, so they can see that there's a supernatural experience to have your love wash over them, to be in that radiating presence that you offer us, Yahusha. We love you so much, and we close this meeting tonight in your precious, amazing name, Yahusha Messiah. So be it.